want to get a hold of me, this is my email. That's my game site. My ICO is softcoin.com. All right, so we'll get this out of the way. So I started an ICO in October. So we're running through the end of, about 3 more weeks. So I was going to talk a little bit about what I'm doing specifically, but then more generically about ICOs. But I'm kind of curious. So the people in here, are you into blockchain because you're speculating on the currency? Hands? Nobody. Just 2 of you. 3? Okay. You're interested in the technology? Okay, cool. Because that's what I'm interested in. Is I look at these thousands of currencies that are available. If everybody's successful, think about what your life is like. You're walking around with a device that's got 2,000 or 3,000 currencies on it. I was actually at a blockchain conference last week, and I was talking to the different vendors, everybody's who's doing their dog and pony show. And the last one I talked to, it was a medical records one. And it was 2 millennials, no offense, younger people, and they're sitting behind a table like this. And I come up, there's nobody else around, I'm looking at their stuff, and they're just talking to each other. For about 2 full minutes, they ignore me. And so I ask them, I say, hey, I write for Bitcoin Magazine, tell me what you're doing. So they're explaining how they're going to put your medical records on the blockchain. Great, I think that's a good idea. So I asked them, what was the point of your token? So as I discussed it, I said, so let me get this straight. So if I want to get to my records, I need to open an exchange account, which involves taking a picture of your passport, sending it in, getting my money in there. Then I got to track down wherever you're getting traded at, get your token. Then I log into your site, and I use your token, and then I can get to my medical records super quick and easy, because that was their whole thing. They're like, yeah, that sounds simple and straightforward to me. Like, not really. There's sort of a lot of steps involved there. So whenever you're looking at these ICOs, it's like, what is the utility? Like, look at EOS right now. It's not anything. If they do what I think they say they're going to do, it could be very interesting. But they've been intentionally pumping their currency right now. I got some inside information the other day in terms of them using internal funds during the excitement last month to get their rate up. So they've gone from like $1.50 to $15 in the space of a month. That's a great rate of return. But what's their technology going to be? So with what I did is we have this game. It's not groundbreaking. It's a time management game like Lords of Ultima or that kind of thing. But it runs on iOS, Android, Windows, Mac, Linux. It already works on all of those. And what we wanted to do was add an element of economic management. So within the game, you buy gold, and with gold you can buy speed ups and whatever. We've got a full open market in there, a free market. So you could, say, build up an archer, and then you could decide to sell it. You could sell a whole village. You could do whatever you wanted. So we thought it'd be interesting to tie that currency to a cryptocurrency, because then the price can fluctuate. So now it makes it a little bit more interesting because, I want to buy up gold, because everything in there is gold. So if it's 50 gold, which costs 50 cents at one point, what about if it costs $5? It's still 50 gold. So you got to think about when you're going to buy. Now you've built some things up, you want to sell them. It's like, I'm kind of done with the game. You could sell it, you could cash out and go spend it in the real world. But the reality, so it's interesting. I don't need to do it on crypto. I'm not solving a problem by doing it on crypto. I'm just trying to make the game slightly more interesting. We'll do it whether the ICO is successful or not. It'll just slow us down a little bit because we're doing it in our spare time anyway. And when you use coins in the game, it'll be crypto. You can care or you can not care, because you could go and trade it, or you can just play the game and use up your money and you're done, right? Just like you would normally play. So in that case, there's a utility. Not saving lives, not saving the planet, nothing like that. So what I wanted to say real quick before I forget, I'm doing this mostly extemporaneously, I knocked out 23 articles for Bitcoin Magazine this month. It has been a horrific schedule, and so there's been a lot of news that came across my desk, including the Korean one, which I'll touch on. But for the 2 people who have the most interesting questions, as decided by you guys, I'll give you 50,000 of my tokens. That's worth 1 penny. No, that's worth $50 at some point if somebody buys it. So it's up to you if you want to ask a question. With Korea, that was brought up, what's happening there is there's a lot of money laundering going on. There's a lot of private accounts, virtual accounts, and the government doesn't like it. The governments don't like currency out of their hands. But what's happening is there's 6 approved banks with the government where you have to go and have a named account. You have to be tied to your cryptocurrency account. So there was a big news piece yesterday, Arise Bank. Don't know if you saw this. They were going to be banking, and they claimed they had bought 2 FDIC insured banks. They claimed they had raised $600 million of the $1 billion that they were going to raise in a month. The SEC came in and said, this is the most obvious scam we have ever seen, and shut them down, raided their homes with guns, raided their offices, took everything, and now they're shut down. So you got to be really careful about what you're doing. Is there a point to anything that you're doing? If you look at what's happened just in recent times, look, did anybody play CryptoKitties? Okay. So that might be the only thing that anybody's doing on Ethereum other than making tokens, right? Ethereum's awesome at making tokens. But think about what happened with CryptoKitties. That one marginally interesting thing that was marginally successful brought Ethereum to its knees. What does that say for the thousands of people who want to build critical information structure on top of Ethereum? It means there's a serious problem. So I was looking at Quantum recently. I had to write that up. They've got some interesting things going on. They're building a virtual, an x86 VM inside of there. They already execute Ethereum code, but you'll be able to run any kind of code, Go, Python, Java, whatever you want inside these VMs. That won't be till the end of the year, but in March they've got a partnership coming up where they're going to have 50,000 full nodes. Bitcoin's 10,000, Ethereum's 20,000. So now you look and you go, maybe that's a better platform to work on. NEM just got hacked the other day. Did you see that? $500 million. Now they're recovering it. They were able to tag them and get a hold of everybody. NEM was interesting technology. I liked it. But for a currency play, and I realize I'm just jumping across a broad spectrum of topics, but you know who Bram Cohen is? BitTorrent? Okay. He invented BitTorrent. He left BitTorrent last year to focus on blockchain. He announced what he was doing a few months ago, Chia. So Chia.network, I think, is the most interesting thing in terms of a pure cryptocurrency play. He's got a hybrid of proof of time and proof of space architecture for consensus. So it doesn't require this, just obscene amount of energy and computing power that's required for proof of work. It should be out by summer, but basically you can buy a terabyte hard drive. I think, what are they calling them? Harvesters, not harvesters, farmers maybe. And it just fills up checksum data like bingo cards on your hard drive. So it democratizes mining a lot more, or farming, or whatever they called it. And it reduces all these obscene power consumption issues and the heat waste and everything else that's involved in it. And I mean, you see how Bitcoin gets manipulated. JP Morgan comes out and says, we think it's bunk. It drops, JP Morgan buys it. And you see this all the time. It's just a small number of people are manipulating prices constantly in this environment. So I think Chia will be super interesting. Hyperledger Sawtooth 1.0 just got released this week as a blockchain technology. I'd say it's probably more like validating servers, a little bit like Ripple, but it allows you to develop sort of an internal blockchain deployment, and it has a lot more language support. Go is one, C#, some of these others, and it will run the Ethereum virtual machine. So there's a lot of interesting options out here, but what you're going to run into is everybody wants a Solidity programmer. Solidity is a terrible language. Does anybody know Solidity in here?
JavaScript? Hey.
Yeah, it's a hack of JavaScript, and it replaced the last language that they did, and now they're going to come out with yet another language. And they're working on sharding, and they're working on proof of stake. But I talked to one of the big miners around here. He said the miners will never approve the code to proof of stake because they won't make anything. So then what's that going to be? Is it going to be another Ethereum fork? I don't know. You got to look at these things as you look at a technology base. So I have companies come to me all the time. I'm going to probably go to Kenya in a couple of weeks for an actual interesting one called NeuroCoin, and they want to build this whole thing from scratch. So I've been looking at all this because I'm interested in the technology. They want to be able, because African currencies, wildly different exchange rates. They actually drive in trucks across the desert from Kenya to Nigeria filled with cash because there's no good way to get the money back and forth. And so there's pirates on the roads, and they get stolen from. So I'm going there. And so I'm looking at all this technology, and I'm looking at how I'm using it in my game, And I'm looking at what everybody's doing, and they're all just obsessed with making money, and all of it's just speculative. So in terms of advice that I could give you is to understand the database structures that are involved and how things are stored, and cryptographic algorithms, and how the actual underpinnings of blockchain, and how you would develop a technology for somebody. So say, for example, you want to make your own coin, and you want to make your own distributed system, or if you want to tie in regulatory compliance, how would you do these things? These are the kind of questions I get asked when I talk to companies. I talk to lots and lots of companies all the time. As soon as you're writing for Bitcoin Magazine, they're just like hitting you up everywhere. Hey, can you run our ICO? Bitcoin Magazine doesn't care about your ICO. The Kodak ICO, that was interesting. And it actually made sense. When I saw it, because they asked me to write it, I'm like, oh, this is idiotic. It's going to be like, what was it, Jack Daniels or something that changed their name? Long Island Iced Tea became like Block Long Chain or something ridiculous. So the SEC is now starting to crack down on that, just like in the dot-com boom, which I was also a part of, and everybody's putting an I and an E in front of everything. That's why you have an iPod and an iPhone and everything else. It's an outgrowth from that period of time. I worked for a medical billing company, a workers' comp, and they wanted to put an I in front of their name. It was called ReviewCo. iReviewCo. Why? We don't do anything on the internet. It was just like, it was the most ridiculous thing. So now everybody's putting block in front of it and chain, and it's bogus, it's crap. So you're in an interesting time, and it's fun to have gone through this. I was writing websites before IIS was out, before Internet Explorer was out. I was doing it in Notepad and trying to talk to Microsoft Access databases, and we had to build all of our own SSL tunnels to the banks. This was before porn came along and helped us with all the financial processing. Thank you, porn, for breaking new ground in video streaming and financial technology online. But it's true. It's just funny. So you're going to see a huge shaking out right now, and my advice would be to focus on the underpinning technology. Not everything needs to be on a blockchain. The stuff that can be, voting systems, I think are super fascinating. I would love to deploy those, even within a homeowners association, because you want to see it, financial disclosures from your politicians.
These kids probably don't know what a homeowners association is. You buy one to explain.
You buy a house, and then there's a group of people that have a lot of time on their hands, and they charge you money so they can walk around and tell you have too many rocks in your front yard. But there's elections for it. So like I ran for city council last year. I was actually thinking of running for Mimi Walter's seat this year, but I'm going to probably do city council if I have time. But election systems and financial disclosures, because if you want to know where people are getting their money from, you can go and get a financial disclosure. But it's a lot of steps. Why can't I just go and look at that online? Why can't it be secure information? Critical records. A friend of mine's wife is from Peru. She said basically every 10 years, City Hall burns down, and all the birth certificates and all the critical records disappear. And everybody has to show back up at City Hall and reprove who they are, and then it's all back on paper, and then 10 years later it all burns down again. They might do it intentionally. It might be a Job Security Act. I don't know. Think about royalty systems. I mean, more and more of these things are coming out, but like every time somebody bought something on iTunes. Like I'm a musician. I had a record label for 15 years. I actually almost won a Grammy in 2016. I was in the final group for Best Rock Performance. I know I look like a rock star. I did 30 years ago, not so much now. But imagine every time somebody buys it, it's $10. These guys get their 30%. Everybody that's a writer, it's pre-configured in the transaction. So the moment the transaction takes place, everybody that's involved in it gets their money. I would love that as record label owner. The amount of work involved in tracking royalties, and everybody's playing games with what went on with the money. Streaming services. I've got 150,000 plays on one of my songs. It's paid 20 cents so far. I love streaming. I'm going to buy, I don't know, some gum, maybe one stick of gum with my royalties from streaming. So look at the technology. Look at where you can focus. Solidity's good. Learning how to audit code. The expense associated now with an ICO, you're looking at like $100,000. And almost all of it is noise. Almost all of it is BS. And they complain, and people who are in the space complain about the signal to noise ratio, but they follow the shiny ball every single time. So they don't want it, but that's what they react to. They don't care if you're legitimate. I was in some Facebook groups when I was promoting my ICO heavier, and like, oh, well, you're a scam. It's like, I'm the owner. You want to look at my LinkedIn profile? You want to look at my 30 years of history? You want to read any of my 300 published articles? It's hardly a scam. You know, you could probably look up my house in 2 minutes online or 20 seconds. So if you go into the Bitcoin Talk forum, I get, as soon as I was in there, boom, for 3 Bitcoin, which is now $30,000, it was up to $60,000 there for a bit. You know, we will spam the hell out of the Bitcoin forum with 500 posts for the next week. I had 6 different companies send me that. So how many legitimate users are there in the Bitcoin Talk forum? Not a lot. Twitter, same thing. Somebody says, oh, I've got 20,000, 50,000 followers on Twitter. I've got 1,000 subscribers to my YouTube channel. Everybody thinks that they're an expert and that they can charge you $4,000. I'm not joking. To list your ICO on ICO Countdown was $4,000. Just the name and the date. That's it. And I worked out a deal with them. I got 50 click-throughs through there. Is that worth $4,000? No. All of these people are going to charge you a ton of money. Because I work in the publishing and writing area, I get people coming to me, hey, can you fit this into an editorial? So whenever you're reading this stuff, almost nobody discloses that it's sponsored. They don't disclose the rates unless you ask to run something. Then you'll find out what the rates are, and it turns out they want $5,000 for this, $10,000 for that. So almost everything you're reading is sponsored content. It's not disclosed. So you've got to do a lot of research if you're interested in adopting a technology, if it's real, if you're looking at investing in anything. There are so many moving parts. There's so much duplicitousness going on. Like I said, with EOS, they're using their own money to buy up during that boom last month when everything was just exploded to get the excitement going, and then they suddenly started doing some press releases. Then they were selling their stuff out to get their money out and just kind of gauge the waters, and they made a ton of money, all just by carefully doing their press releases and investing some of their own money to get it in. Now, I like Daniel Larimar, I think his name is, invented Steam. I think he's got a lot of good ideas. He's over there at EOS, and he's supposedly doing the tech, but God only knows, we haven't seen anything yet. So, okay, I've sort of babbled a lot. I think I covered most of what I wanted to cover. Oh, if you didn't see yesterday, Facebook ads. You can no longer advertise an ICO.
I just wish they would take off our ads from
There's a
Facebook.
lot.
Yeah.
I see it, so it's like-
It's probably good, because 90% of them are BS. But it was one of a number of things. It's all sorts of financial get-rich-quick things that they're controlling. All right, so I covered a lot of ground, and I have a question.
I have like 2, actually.
I'm sorry.
So, one thing actually, I just looked through your guys' like kind of pseudo white paper. I'm guessing you guys might like flesh it out better later on. But you guys actually have like the Dragon Chain CEO as your advisor.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. Wait.
But Dragon Chain, I think, and I'm glad you brought it up. So I met Joe, I think back in May, and he was still at Disney at the time, and I really, really liked what he was doing. And in what I said at the time, I even did a promotional video for him, is it was blockchain designed by adults. Because he actually understands how things work, how you've got to scale. So they go anywhere from high degree of trust to no trust. And you can sort of like object-oriented instantiate things like currency and database and language and plug in the bits that you want to use. You could deploy it internally, say if you have a high degree of trust, whatever you're trying to do, maybe software licensing, something like that. Or you could do it so it's more like Ethereum. Now the problem is they got so buried in the ICO, they barely got anything done for 5 months. So we're working on 1.0 and 2.0 simultaneously, neither one of which is quite done. So I've been waiting for that because there's some things I'd really like to do with it.
And then the other one too is, I think it becomes really interesting with like these type of games. I think that scalability is a very important issue to tackle. And I was wondering like how your game's going to handle like, well, let's say your game becomes mainstream, or because that's a long-term play, right? That's what
Sure.
we're investing in. That it'll be a mainstream game. You could be dealing with millions of transactions per second.
Yeah.
Hypothetically speaking, right? Like people could be cross-transacting between each other for items on a countless basis. And what worries me a little bit is that with these games, you have to find a way to have kind of like essentially like a hot wallet where it's like you can handle those transactions on a micro level, I would say, just for the game. But like, how does it update on like, let's say I have like a tracker, like Etherscan, right? How does it update on there? Like, if I make a transaction, I trade with a player peer-to-peer,
Mm.
how long does it take to update on for the world to see the distributed ledger, basically?
Well, because you've got essentially your wallet in the game, we can kind of batch transactions in the real world unless you're cashing out. Now, I'm not writing the code. I'm a programmer from way back, but I'm kind of done, writing everything. So you'd have to ask Alex for some of the details on that, and he's not here. But I understand what you're saying, because scalability is a big deal. But this kind of a game, because I've worked on these kinds of games before, and I've got like 1.5 million players from previous games I've done like this. So, when we're finished, we'll send it out to them. In general, so we're using Qt, if you're not familiar with the Qt framework. And for this, it's fantastic. We got all those platforms, iOS, Android, Mac, Linux, Windows, for free. We wrote it once. Same code runs everywhere. We just have to build it for each platform. But that's nothing. It's all built in. So we cache a significant amount, like graphics and things like that, are on your site. We can scroll, you can all sorts of map windows. But there isn't any really kind of live, real-time action. What were we using? Redis with Maria, and what else do we have in there? God, there was something else. But we're using Go on the back end, and so it's primarily QML on the client with some C++. Did I answer your question? Or kind of got into some different weeds?
Different weeds.
All right. Don't smoke those weeds. Stay clean, young man. Yeah, you can only test so long. What we found with the other game is, at a certain point, because it's meant to be split up across servers, we can just throw more servers at it if it gets to the point. The way it's designed, scaling will help that. The way it's designed, I don't think we'd ever get I/O bound, but we have some alternative indexing methods if we get stuck in pulling data. I don't see it as a problem right now. There's enough of it cached in the client. But we'll see. Yeah?
So Andrew's talking about Sawtooth.
Yeah.
As far as what I know about it, it's proof of elapsed time, right?
Yes.
So you need hardware you need special hardware to validate to get consensus.
What I'm not sure is if they're talking to time servers like
I think
Gia's
they're
going to
talking
do.
about actual hardware that are running on the chip itself. And
I'm not positive.
That's as far as I know, and I know that that project's mainly backed by Intel.
Well, Intel started it, and they donated it to the Hyperledger project. It's kind of like Apache Foundation. You get all these code projects that get dumped in there. So they just announced the 1.0. But